We can start, I think. So, Enea, did you want to kick us off with the questions, or do you prefer me to go through all of the questions one by one?
Yeah, maybe we can do a sort of a collaborative presentation here, and I mean, I think you have a lot of insights that people will love to hear, particularly from you and Adam. Maybe I can do a little introduction to and give you then the word. So for the people who just joined, we are holding this space because there were a lot of questions that popped up in the past weeks. Also, a lot of attention coming to the blockchain group. Personally, I didn't know it 1 month ago. Then I discovered it, and it was like very interesting. Being from Europe myself and located in Europe, I discovered finally a European BTC Treasury company with following Saylor strategy. So very very unique, the first one, as you wrote also and presented in your own presentation. So maybe for all the shareholders, I don't know, it would be very interesting to hear from you first person, like a little intro about, I guess, the blockchain group. What are you doing? Why what are you guys doing, and what makes you special as well?
Awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you for coordinating the different questions. And thank you all for joining. We are very happy to have this vibrant community for ALTBG. I'm Alexandre Laizet, Deputy CEO and Director of Bitcoin Strategy at the Blockchain Group, Europe's first Bitcoin treasury company. So we are replicating the exact playbook of strategy and of Metaplanet at European scale level. And we are fully focused on maximizing BTC per share over time. That's our full focus since the very beginning. And what makes us special is that we have, since the start of the Bitcoin treasury company strategy, strategic investors like Adam Back, of course, the only person mentioned in the white paper and the inventor of the algorithm that runs within Bitcoin mining, that is with us today, and that started invested since December, and that continued back in March and now in May. And so we also have Tobam, a French leading 2 billion asset manager who has been pioneering Bitcoin since 2017. They have launched the first open-ended fund in France for Bitcoin. And with Yves Chefati as an individual with his holding since December, and with Tobam, the funds back in March, and as well now that we announced in equity with his funds on Friday. So we also have Fulgur Ventures, which is the largest Bitcoin venture capital fund deployed in various Bitcoin companies and now active in public companies like us. And they have subscribed to the majority of our BTC denominated convertible bonds that we issued back in March. And we have many more key investors like Ludovic Chauchin-Laurent, who is the main individual shareholder with about 8% of the capital, who is also part of the board and is the co-founder of Capital Union Bank, the largest independent bank in the Bahamas. So we have a lean and focused team dedicated to Bitcoin with the board, and our Bitcoin treasury operations year to date have already generated 17x more BTC euro gain than our net result for the operational company of last year. And so effectively right now, we are our main operations are the ones of a Bitcoin treasury company. We are laser eyes focused on Bitcoin. It's Bitcoin only. It's the strategy playbook. It's raising capital in accretive conditions as much as possible with the market moving forward, and accumulating Bitcoin, never selling the Bitcoin, never losing the Bitcoin. Those are our core strategies, working with institutional grade partners. And so maybe Adam, do you want to add a few words about the blockchain group and your rationale into your investment in the company?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So Yeah, so I thought the company, the software company is, I thought the software company itself was a good investment from looking at the financials that are on a public company information. And I want to support the introduction of a Bitcoin Treasury company strategy into Europe. As I understand it, there are there are many French Bitcoin holders who could then potentially make use of this if they do it through PEA, kind of tax structure with some tax advice. But in any case, very interesting to see an additional company join the space. And the blockchain group is more of a kind of established operating company in the software sector, and with sort of 3 sub-companies, one doing independent software developer, some blockchain work in integrations, and a AI consulting advisory company, another subsidiary. So it's a company with revenue which is a good ratio of its market cap before the Bitcoin strategy. And I think some of the other companies have, an example of Metaplanet, which I'm an investor in and quite like, but the company was not doing well because of the hotel industry impact of COVID. So really, it was mostly Bitcoin strategy. But ALTBG has got, I think potentially more synergy value because it's a software company that can continue to do things with Bitcoin and Bitcoin layer 2 and grow that part of the business as well as the treasury business. So I think it's off to a good start. So perhaps in terms of the trajectory and pace of purchasing Bitcoin, raising capital through a number of different methods, and some very novel things about their convertible note, which perhaps Alexandre or others will explain.
Thank you a lot. I think you mentioned already some very key aspects that there are a lot of questions regarding those aspects. I think I want to just add one more word before moving to more in depth into some of the things you've mentioned. I think it resonated with everyone, the mission that is in your presentation, like that is crystal clear, like accumulate as much as Bitcoin as possible, as fast as possible, in the most accretive way as possible. So we really like that a bit. I think we all come from MSTR. That's the model that we liked, and that's why we like a lot the blockchain group. What you mentioned, Adam, and also Alexandre, I would say there is a topic that is connected to the limitations, but also to the opportunities of being a European player. And I think around these, most people, above all in US, where the main Bitcoin history, let's say, is being made right now, or most things are going on. We don't know very well the European landscape when it comes to Bitcoin Treasury or Bitcoin, also because it's diverse. It changes from country to country. There are different rules. Could you enlighten us a little bit more about the European landscape, and if there are limitations or advantages of being a pure European player? I think we would love to hear about that.
Absolutely. So, well, the first element is that, as you know, taxes are high in the EU overall, and of course in France as well. And so TBG is effectively the only solution for French taxpayer to get access to Bitcoin exposure with a leverage aspect with the BTC yield that we can increase over time in a tax-free manner with a local tax exemption wrapper that we have in France that is called the PEA, that enables French taxpayer to invest and buy and sell stocks within this wrapper without incurring any tax. And so, of course, that's a major advantage of being the first and largest Bitcoin treasury company in Europe. Then on other companies that are adopting Bitcoin on the balance sheet, well, of course, there are many companies that adopt Bitcoin on their balance sheet, but to date, there is only us in the European Union that are focused on Bitcoin per share, which I call a Bitcoin treasury company, not with the only criterion of having Bitcoin on the balance sheet, but actually being a Bitcoin treasury company is to focus on Bitcoin per share, increase over time. And we've been the first and the only one in Europe. Now there is, of course, as well in the UK, the Smarter Web company that is launching, and we wish them well. We believe that the more Bitcoin treasury companies, the more upside for Bitcoin treasury companies, and especially the first and largest one. And that's also why Strategy is promoving Bitcoin for corporations. And I see that Bitcoin for corporations just join us. Welcome. So I think that the more we have Bitcoin treasury companies, the more this becomes an industry and not just a place for a few leaders. I think that the more there will be capital allocation into Bitcoin and into Bitcoin treasury companies. And I think that as many people in this call should be in the Bitcoin space since 5 years, 10 years, we might all feel a bit that everyone that is joining always feels late, But what happens is that the world is just waking up to Bitcoin, or still not even realizing the potential of Bitcoin, and people completely underestimate the potential of Bitcoin itself and of Bitcoin treasury companies. And that's a virtuous cycle as well. And that's why Strategy is pushing and leading the Bitcoin for corporations movement, is that as much Bitcoin treasury companies acquire Bitcoin and suppress the supply available on exchanges, basically, as much Bitcoin price goes up, as much Bitcoin treasury companies can raise capital, and as much they can become powerful. What is not seen is that, for example, Strategy in the US could become a multi-trillion company. And in these conditions, their options to grow will be unlimited. And of course, that's the reason of our bold plan that we published a few weeks ago about our intention to acquire as much as, or even, of course, more if we can, but towards 1% of the Bitcoin total supply. Of course, that's an ambitious goal, and I think we will get back to this. But we believe that if we continue to execute on the strategy, we have the capacity to follow the steps of Metaplanet for Asia and Strategy for the US and the world. And if we do that and Bitcoin goes to 1 million, 2 million in the meantime, which assumes a potential CAGR of 30%, of course, can be more, but to be conservative, then TBG could become potentially, if we execute this plan, Europe's largest publicly traded corporation, with 210 to 420 billion market capitalization, of course, if we execute on this plan. And so there is massive potential for the future, and massive potential as well for us right now to execute the plan and to go as fast as possible on the execution. Adam, do you want to add something on the opportunity for TBG in Europe specifically? Oh, it seems like you don't have the... Yeah, you might be able to speak now. Yeah, you're in mute.
Oh, okay, okay, now I'm good. Yeah, I lost the connection. So, yeah, I mean, I think that, sometimes people will ask about the treasury companies because it's a new effect and they are uncertain. That will, is it sustainable? Meaning, if more and bigger companies start participating, like some of these public companies with enormous cash reserves, like Apple and so on, eventually Microsoft, might participate. Would it impact the market? And I think my answer is no, because as Alexandre just described, the more individuals either buying Bitcoin on exchanges or by ETFs or by treasury companies are buying Bitcoin, that is additional demand coming into the space and different ways, more accessible ways for people to invest in it with better tax treatment, or in some countries it's very hard to buy Bitcoin, for example, the UK. That could be an audience for ALTBG in sort of tax planned accounts there. So I think the addressable market is enormous, because one way to look at what's happening is it's an arbitrage between the fiat denominated current world and a Bitcoinized future. And so I think this arbitrage, you could look at what the treasury companies are doing as a form of arbitrage, using the available corporate fundraising methods to acquire Bitcoin at today's prices, planning for the future. So I think it's ultimately something like $100 trillion arbitrage, so that, if the top 100 companies in the world by market cap, went at the kind of pace and focus of ALTBG or Metaplanet or MicroStrategy, it would still take years to arbitrage the difference, right? So I think this is actually a virtuous cycle. Sometimes when there is a sort of a mispricing or a confusion in the market, it can take a while for people to understand the shift, and so that arbitrage can sit there for longer. And normally, if it was a fully understood arbitrage and something changed in the market, people would apply, fund managers and hedge funds and traders would apply a lot of pressure and reprice things. But I think the Bitcoin repricing is so large that it's going to take, decades or more, right? So yeah, I think it's all slowly accelerating as the institutions start to understand Bitcoin. And I think other companies can't ignore the phenomenon, because the companies that have adopted it have shown such exceptional performance versus the general stock market for technology companies or other companies, that eventually it will just become impossible to ignore, or they'll be impacted in the market, which is their shareholders will reallocate from Microsoft, Apple, Tesla, all these companies towards treasury companies. So I think it's still early, in fact. So, even though people who've been in Bitcoin for a while might feel it's late, I think ultimately in the big picture, it's still extremely early. And in a way, I feel that is because there's still so much confusion and so many people who could benefit, in companies or individuals or in countries' reserves, that are sitting on the sidelines confused about what's happening, or not feeling it's risky, not understanding the fundamentals. So it's very interested to support companies on this path, because I think arbitrage is a very good market activity. By arbitraging something, you're helping everybody improve pricing and close the gap of misunderstanding in the market. And many actors don't really learn until they see an economic effect where their decision is suboptimal. Then they will learn and adapt.
Yeah, you made a very good point, Adam. And I read, or maybe I take two things out of, in addition to what you said, in what you just said, like competitive advantage, both regarding timing, and we can already observe that those companies that already started buying Bitcoin are already ahead of the others, because the moment Bitcoin grows in price to the next level, it will be harder for newcomers to catch up. But also I see with examples like Metaplanet, and here a question, I want to raise a question from Ragnar, a very good question about a location-driven competitive advantage. So we know Metaplanet has a location advantage because they are within the Japanese ecosystem, which is peculiar, which they know very well, and they manage to integrate very well with it. And also they were the first one and the only one doing that. So the question goes for you, Alexander, like, do you think that actually the regulatory challenges that might be related to Europe and the diversity of across countries and so on could be not just a limitation sometimes as is perceived above all in US, but actually a big competitive advantage for a European player like the blockchain group. Because I wouldn't see a US company easily accessing capital in Europe for like to become a Bitcoin treasury company or to contribute to their Bitcoin purchases in comparison to a pure European player.
Yeah, I think that what Metaplanet has done extremely well is to build a Bitcoin accumulation machine. And I think the question is, can we build that here in France? And I think that the response is that yes, we can. And I think that it can take a bit of time, of course, as it did for Metaplanet. But I think that a thing that is missed a bit is that France specifically has been a leader in the adoption of digital assets overall for years. And in fact, the MiCA regulation in Europe is the exact innovation that was pushed by France at the beginning, that then MiCA became a huge machine, and it has a lot of very bad parts as well, of course. But in fact, the French regulators are part of the ones that are the most advanced in Bitcoin and in the industry overall. And so since the very beginning, we have had very good relationships with them, with the local regulator called the AMF. And in fact, every regulator and the auditors were already prepared for having Bitcoin on the balance sheet. And so we have very constructive discussions with the regulator every time we do an operation. And so that's, of course, a good place to start. And then we have started programs, and we have been authorized for other programs that, of course, we have to work on. And so what we have started to do right now is private placements in equity, meaning that we have the right to reserve capital increases for specific investors, professional investors specifically, to increase the number of Bitcoin on the balance sheet through equity issuance. We have started BTC denominated convertible debt, which was extremely well received by the market and provided something that is not available elsewhere in the market, which is basically a best of between Bitcoin and a call option on the company, and also protects hugely the company as we are already in the money with this instrument, and contributed to increasing very significantly the BTC yield and having a record BTC yield among Bitcoin treasury companies. And the third thing we have done is the launch of stock acquisition rights program for retail investors. So far, we have had the authorization to do about 8 million euros of this, 7 to 8 million euros of this. And so to do more of this and really have a scaled Bitcoin accumulation machine, that would mean to go through a public offering. And so we have obtained the authorization to do it. And we have obtained the authorization to do it for up to 300 million euros. But that's also why we are having a General Assembly on June 10th to have the approval, the same approvals of the one of February 21st, with all the instruments I mentioned, plus, of course, the traditional convertible debt in fiat, but that would be more of a last step. We have the General Assembly June 10th to get the approval to do all of these financial instruments at scale for up to 10 billion euros. And so, of course, it's a capacity. It doesn't mean that we will do 10 billion one day after the other, but it's a capacity that we have to make sure that if we have major investors that want to come in, and if we are able to do public offerings, and if we get the authorization to do it, then we could do it at scale. And so that's what we are planning for. And of course, public offerings take a bit more time. They require prospectus. And so, of course, we are working on scaling the Bitcoin accumulation machine for ALTBG. But I think that we can already do very fast Bitcoin accumulation programs with the tools that we have right now. And that's why, for example, we did this private placement on a Friday last week that allowed to have conditions with 60% premium over the 20-day moving average, which was equivalent to an ATM, basically, but in a private placement way. And that allowed us to transform interest from investors and local investors. We have major funds and banks that have joined on this private placement, but basically to convert those interests into new Bitcoin for the company. And these private placements programs, plus the different convertible debt denominated in Bitcoin, in and of itself are extremely potentially efficient to increase the BTC yield, with the fact that we are already the #1 publicly traded stock in Paris out of all stocks traded in Paris. And we are just getting started because we have not even started public offerings. And so that provides, of course, massive opportunity. Of course, volatility along the way, because we are an early stage Bitcoin treasury company. And so there is more premium, more capacity to raise capital in ways that increase faster BTC yield. But of course, there is more volatility. And so that's where we are. And I hope this provided a bit more answer to your question.
Thank you. That's very...
Could I
Sorry.
I just want to add a comment from the previous question, which was about the being difficult for new companies to catch up with existing treasury companies because they bought Bitcoin at a slightly lower price. I mean, I think MicroStrategy's average is probably around a $65,000 to $70,000 range, so not that much advantage. But I would say I don't really see it as an issue where you have to catch up, because what matters for the individual investor is the per share metrics, right? So, you know, if somebody invested 10,000 euros, they could do that in MicroStrategy or they could do that in ALTBG. They own a smaller percentage of MicroStrategy because it's a bigger company. But if the metrics for ALTBG are better, or it's a domestic company or a European company, that can have some advantages in market access. So I think it's, you know, there's not really any economic disadvantage. And if anything, Metaplanet has shown that a new entrant can actually outperform MicroStrategy during a 12-month period. And in fact, ALTBG, you know, has some extremely strong metrics from the start so far, arguably exceeding even Metaplanet on a short time frame. We'll see where it sells.
Very, very good point. Thanks. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, and so actually, why don't we talk about some numbers? So I read here from some of the posts we are sharing in the communities, just like taking the numbers also from your presentation. So the blockchain group has a very ambitious target goal. Like we are looking at between 150 to 300 million of euros in BTC by end of 2025. 1 to 2 billions between 26 and 27, and 15 to 30 billions by 2029. Like I think many people, I read the comments when reading these numbers, were really excited. At the same time, they asked the questions like, okay, is this really realistic? Are they going to make it? You just presented like a set of tools, financial tools that you can use to actually achieve that. What would you say are, first, I mean, I don't know, your chances also of getting into the upper hand of that target? How do you see things developing? But also, what are the tools in terms of financial instruments that you would bet by what you're right now perceiving will work the best and you will count the most on?
Well, so on the plan, I think that what is important to have in mind to analyze those numbers is that the potential capital raising capacity that we have announced is a period per period capacity. And so it's not cumulated capital raising, it's every period of this slide that we have published is the amount of capital that we could raise, the capacity for this 1 to 2 year period. On the other side, the potential total BTC holdings is what we could raise, is what we could accumulate in a cumulated way. And so I think that maybe that could help with the analysis of our 8-year BTC plan. And then what is interesting is that between the two placements, we have really started with some scale today, meaning the private placement in equity and the BTC denominated convertible debt. Those are very different beasts. And so the equity private placement is much more attractive for traditional fund managers and traditional capital allocators and traditional finance. And so usually these financial institutions, they come in hordes, and if there is a belief that they can invest in the company, they would aggregate, and we would aggregate them into private placement. We can also, of course, have one specific institution that come in as we go. And so those are elements that allow to raise capital in an effective and frequent way. Of course, we intend to be even more frequent. But what is interesting is that with the BTC convertible debt, you can have in with one family office potentially 500 Bitcoin that the family office doesn't know what to do with. And so the BTC denominated convertible note is a very effective way to welcome BTC rich investors that have an arbitrage between Bitcoin itself and an early stage best performing Bitcoin treasury company. And so that without even limit, we can scale that ad infinitum because we have no credit risk on the operation. And so that's something that is very interesting because with traditional fiat convertible debt, you would conservatively limit the capital raised through fiat convertible debt to 20 to 30% of the BTC value, not related to a debt instrument. And so that's why I got the question a few days ago. That's why we proceeded with a BTC denominated convert. It was to increase significantly the BTC per share in a way that didn't increase our credit risk as a company. And so with those two tools, the equity private placements and the BTC denominated convert, we already have two products that are extremely accretive for different types of investors. And with the BSA and the different public offerings that we have the authorization to do, and that we will have hopefully the authorization to do after 10th June at scale with up to 10 billion. I think those are all elements that could really accelerate our Bitcoin treasury company strategy. And I've duly noted all your feedback as a community on the fact that we should do more work in terms of communication and metrics and websites and insights and presence on social media. I've been fully focused on raising capital and increasing the BTC per share, but we definitely intend to communicate much more. That's what we have started with the slides that and the keynote that I did at Strategy World 2025 with the annual result presentation that we have published on the website. And that's what we will do more. And that's why also we recruited and we announced yesterday the welcome of Valentin Kozanovic, who is with us today, who is the most rigorous and talented person I've been working with over the years with the 30 plus financial institutions I was helping with at Accenture on adopting Bitcoin. And so he's joining us as well to accelerate this communication, improve the website, and really transform the company not only on the BTC per share, but also on the communication around the BTC per share increase.
Thank you, and big welcome to Valentin, if I pronounce it well.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Do you want to give a little intro about yourself as well and join the conversation?
Yes, of course. Hello, everyone. Glad to have you all around the space. So, Valentin Kosanovic. So, I've been working along with Alexandre for several years now. Before at Accenture, working with financial institutions on the development of their digital assets strategy. And now, obviously, I'm very, very excited to come on board to the ALTBG rocket ship to accelerate on the development of the Bitcoin Treasury company strategy. And I said, Alexandre, we have a lot of work to do, but we are committed to make the rocket ship go even faster.
And so we definitely welcome all contributions, and we really thank you for all of your analysis. And we really take into account your feedback into the website, the communications, and so on. So please feel free to continue to pushing us forward on this.
Thank you for that. I think it's a great asset, like to have this type of approach. I think the people are definitely observing and listening, and I mean the trust that we are seeing now around some BTC treasuries is actually what is part of the equation that then drives people to actually buy the stock and then support the growth. So yeah, I think it's a big plus, like already this space, but also this your openness actually to look into that. Yeah, I would say we can move forward to maybe, if you want, to talk about some numbers, like, because also there were questions about that. We know you mentioned you might think about a dashboard as for example, Strategy and Metaplanet have, and now also Saylor. Could you give us some numbers and also mention maybe the current market capitalization considering the diluted shares? And if you already have some forward-looking vision or expectations, yeah, that would be amazing to hear about that.
Yeah, so as a general guidance, the latest numbers in terms of fully diluted shares, ordinary shares, are published in our website on the financial information tab. And so every time we do a capital increase or BTC denominated converts, we publish the forward-looking potential market capitalization, market table, market cap table with the different investors and their percentage. And so on the other side, to calculate BTC yield, of course, we'll make some improvements to make that available directly on website and so on. But the latest data to really take into account is when we make a purchase. The last one was about March, when we published the completion of the BTC convert with the latest data in terms of BTC yield, BTC per share, and so on. Because there is some fully diluted shares, like the BSA program in France, that can be taken into account, but really matter when they are executed by market participants, and it contributes to Bitcoin per share. And so we will publish when we do announce the acquisition of new Bitcoin, the new metrics around BTC per share and so on. But effectively, we have today current market capitalization of about 130 million and fully diluted shares, depending on if you count the BSA or not, the stock acquisition rights, of about 200 million shares or 230 plus million shares. And so we will publish specific figures calculating the BTC per share when we announce the different BTC acquisitions related to the capital increase of Friday and the convert of Adam on Monday. But that's the rough numbers that to take into account. And so we have currently about 50, 60 million euros of Bitcoin on the balance sheet, with about 100 million common shares, 93 million, and about 200 million fully diluted shares. So that's about a 4x premium between the BTC and the balance sheet and the fully diluted shares. And that's about 2x or about compared with the market cap without taking into account the fully diluted shares. So about a 4x premium, which is quite standard for early stage Bitcoin treasury companies like us and like Metaplanet. And so I see more those premiums as indicators of maturity of the company and as anticipation of market participants of the capacity of the company to generate BTC yield. And so Tobam, the French asset manager, has published a mathematical paper on the topic and has shown that a Bitcoin treasury company can outperform Bitcoin with constant premiums. And so he has shown mathematically what allocation of the performance of strategy can be attributed to BTC performance, BTC yield, and BTC premium. And what is shown is that if you are bullish on Bitcoin, you should be bullish on Bitcoin treasury companies. And if you are bullish on Bitcoin treasury companies, early stage Bitcoin treasury companies that are focused on Bitcoin per share increase over time are quite interesting. Maybe Adam, do you want to share your views on the premiums, the MNAV? I've also seen that you've published a very interesting metric, the months to MNAV. How much time do you take to cover the premium and so on? Do you want to share your views on this, Adam?
Yeah, so I think the numbers you gave about the fully diluted shares, assuming the BSAs are exercised, which in my guess would be near the end of the 12-month period. And so therefore the kind of fully diluted calculation of the MNAV being around 4 now. But I think, even with the private placement last week on Friday, 10 million euros. So we don't know exactly the Bitcoin price because that's yet to happen. But if we just, for sort of a crude assumption, I'm putting that it's worth 10 million euros, as if it was done today. And then the 12 million euros of Bitcoin, actually, but the price fix is not final. Then I think that already would pull the MNAV down to maybe around 3 from the current around 4. So you can see you get this sort of cycle in treasury companies where they are accumulating Bitcoin, pushing down the MNAV, so investors start to think that's cheap compared to its normal, and then they bid the price back up, and then it repeats. So the MNAV is moving a bit, but generally speaking, when the MNAV is low, people see that as an opportunity to accumulate temporarily discounted shares while the market adapts and catches up with the MNAV. You can see that with Metaplanet. It had a MNAV between 5 and 10 generally. For some reason, it got compressed all the way down to 2.5, and then it's picked up, and now it's over 3. So it sort of sometimes can take a while to reprice now. Metaplanet is particularly volatile. I'm assuming that we'll see how the price develops for ALTBG. Maybe it will be lower volatility. And then, so I think the other interesting thing here is the ALTBG has a unique instrument, this Bitcoin denominated convertible note. So Alexandre explained it has, it doesn't bring credit risk, which I think is quite important for a few reasons. One is for institutional investors or just regular investors who are looking at the risk of, putting some Bitcoin into the company, either directly or by selling it and buying company stock or private placement, knowing that they will buy Bitcoin, is that the credit risk of it, because with the convertible notes that MicroStrategy does, there is a conversion premium when the debt becomes equity. So they sold some at 50% premium, but eventually, let's say there is a convertible that doesn't reach the premium because the market turns, then that remains on the books as a debt. And if it reaches maturity, now granted the maturity is very far in the future, typically 5 years, if for some reason the share price didn't reach the premium before maturity, then MicroStrategy has, in principle, to refinance it or pay it, has to pay it back basically. So they could do that by selling shares at presumably not very advantageous price, or selling Bitcoin or something, right? So that risk, I think it's a relatively low risk, but the fact that that risk is there causes people to think about that risk. And the other implication is that the convertible note buyers, I believe the majority of them with MicroStrategy, are actually delta neutral. So they're hedge funds doing some kind of option strategy where they buy the convertible. So they buy 150 million of the convertible with a 50% premium. Then they short 100 million of stock. And then what they're left with is a $50 million call option. And they do some type of option trading to create a yield on that. And when it converts, they cash it in and then they buy the next one. And so for those guys to do that kind of convertible note delta neutral investing, they like to have a kind of implied over collateralization of that debt. So I think that's partly why MicroStrategy will do some converts and some at the market selling of shares to buy Bitcoin, because then if they do 100 million of each, then it's sort of implicitly twice as much Bitcoin relative to the debt. So the interesting thing with the Bitcoin denominated converts is that that whole calculation doesn't need to be there, because the company still has the Bitcoin. They're in custody, independent custodian. If the conversion premium wasn't met, ultimately they could just give the Bitcoin back. So it's almost riskless, as Alexandre explained. So I think that's interesting, and it means you don't have to worry about the capacity, because MicroStrategy is of course very successful and growing through different tiers of market access and passive income flows and things like that. So it has some advantages, but I think this new instrument, the Bitcoin denominated convertible note, is a very interesting thing, and it potentially offers some unique tax advantages to existing Bitcoin holders in a PEA, particularly for French tax residents. I know taxes vary in different countries, so I don't know the full picture in other countries, and I'm not a tax resident in France, but those unique country and region specific things can give a different pool of investors a reason to invest. And so if people have the opportunity to invest in kind in a tax efficient way into a share, and wait to see if it achieves a premium, then they potentially make money on top of their Bitcoin value. But even if it didn't, the worst that could happen generally is they get the Bitcoin back at maturity. So it seems like a very low risk trade for Bitcoin investors. And I've got to think that there must be many, many French Bitcoin holders from different investment periods who could benefit from this structure.
Thank you. That seems quite an innovation and definitely a very strong incentive for any investors, because if they are covered from downside impact, downside risk, that's a very safe bet for them to provide capital. So that's definitely a competitive advantage. Great to hear that, and thank you for the detailed explanation. We are already almost at 1 hour. I need to say we got so many questions. Maybe I propose I ask the last questions among many that we wrote down, and then we would maybe leave the word to anybody who wants to ask more detailed questions and so on, if that's okay for you. Great. So the last question that I think it's that many asked, and it came out, like there was a lot of interest the moment that we started this community, and also the other community, the BTC Treasuries community that I also invite you to join, where we talk about all the BTC Treasuries. We saw a lot of interest regarding from US, of investors, of people who wanted to buy the stock, the share, but they couldn't, or it was not so easy. Like they had to call Fidelity and ask them to get permission to the ticker. So the question that came up over and over was also, will there be US ticker that will allow, like for Metaplanet, US residents and US retail to access it easily and potentially bring a lot more volumes to the stock, to the share.
Yeah, thank you very much. And thank you all for looking at all the ways to buy into ALTBG. I've seen that it's possible through interactive brokers and Fidelity and so on. But I've seen also that sometimes you need to call the institution, and you need to activate the international stock option, and this kind of complications that are counterintuitively is also bullish for LBG, because it means that we have achieved all of this performance without tapping really hard into the US market. But in fact, since we were mentioned in the strategy earnings presentation, our volumes have doubled already. And so what we can see is that we are already a global international stock with local scarcity, which is extremely interesting. And so we have received a lot of requests to have the same type of OTC access in the US as Metaplanet. And of course, that's definitely something that we want to look at. And so we have not announced anything on this matter, but it's definitely one of the key takeaways that I take from the last 2 weeks, and that I think we should definitely look at. So, of course, we will let the community know as soon as we can announce something along these lines. Of course, we cannot commit on anything, but that's definitely one of the key takeaways from the last 2 weeks, and I would like to thank you all for this. In general, we look at any best practice and success from strategy and from Metaplanet, and look into the best ways to adapt that for us in Europe, and to, of course, increase the capacity of all investors to get into ALTBG and join the Bitcoin accumulation strategy. So definitely looking at it, and yeah, that's of course something we look at.
Thank you very much. Then, I don't know, I think there are a lot of people who wrote questions in the community, and if anybody wants to ask, I think that's a very good moment to ask some more questions. I don't know, Ragnar or
Please.
Peter. Yeah.
Oh, I see there is a request. We'll add, yeah. I'm adding someone. Yeah, Suleiman. Yeah, you want to ask a question?
No, thank you.
Okay. Is there someone else?
I could come back to the months to MNAV cover, because I paused before getting to that, if you want.
Yes.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, so I was just looking at trying to understand, when I first invested in a treasury company, the question that comes is, from an investor mindset, is this MNAV too much, too high, or is it reasonable? And you have no tools to think about that, so it's hard, right? And so I came to think that actually the yield and the MNAV are related, because if it can repay the MNAV in a defined period of time, which you can calculate, assuming the yield stays the same and so on, then that can give you a comfort for what is a reasonable MNAV for this company. And the reasonable MNAVs for different companies, I'd already seen empirically, are quite different. Like Metaplanet tends to be 5 and above, and MicroStrategy 2 and above. So there's a big difference in range. But I think it's ultimately explained by a different yield regime. And so what I was calculating is that with Metaplanet, Metaplanet had a multiple of about 3.3, and yet a very high yield, as was discussed. And so it sounds risky because it's a high yield in one way, because it's 50% higher than MicroStrategy, but then the yield is much, much higher than MicroStrategy. So actually 3.3 MNAV on Metaplanet is much safer in a way than 2.2 or 2.1 on MicroStrategy. So the way I sort of try to articulate that as a number is just, well, how long does it take with the current rate of yield until the yield pays for the premium? And in the case of MicroStrategy, I think it's about 18 months. In the case of Metaplanet, it was 5 months, but I think they just pushed it down to about 3.5 because they just bought another large amount of Bitcoin and pushed the yield up. And so you can see, if you're paying, if you're buying something where it has a 3.5 times MNAV, but within 3 months, if the past performance continues, it would have covered that. Then you can see as they continue past that, you are sort of risk insured. The risk you're worried about is the MNAV falls. Generally, I'd say the worst, you could assume it shouldn't fall below 1 because the company would be incentivized to buy their own stock and other people would take advantage of that. Then you're sort of risk covered after that period of time. And what would happen after that is, potential upside as the yield strategy continues. And I also think it's a way to sort of compare different strategy companies. If you look at different corporate bonds with different interest rates, you can compare them based on, bond calculations. But here you can compare companies by looking at, what MNAV is sustained by the yield in each company, and sort of then compare, what would be a good price for ALTBG or Metaplanet if it was at the same kind of adjusted level relative to the months to cover that difference. So, let's say MicroStrategy is 18 months and Metaplanet is 4 months to make it easier. Then you could see that there's a 4.5 times difference. And so you can sort of multiply the share price by that to see the sort of adjusted comparison between them, about where they are in the cycles. So anyway, interesting tool. And I just saw this morning that the Metaplanet made a graph of this in their Q1 results. I presume that was at the conference that Alexandre was at. So it's good to see people getting some value from it as a way to value companies. I think otherwise people get hesitant unduly about high MNAV, but really it's high MNAV is fine if the yield is higher. And actually a high MNAV can be cheaper and safer for one company compared to another if its yield is much lower. So it's just an interesting tool to think about the relative risk you're taking on about how long it would take them to accumulate enough Bitcoin. And coincidentally, if the months to cover, let's cover the MNAV. So it would mean that they would accumulate, if they were currently at 3, they did that again, they would increase the Bitcoin per share by that same ratio. So it's a sort of, it covers the past, but it also means that's the amount of additional Bitcoin per share that they would accumulate in that period.
Another key KPI to include into our communications. Thank you, Adam. I see there was a question maybe from Bidemu. No? Yeah.
Good evening from where I am. Thank you for your time. I have a question regarding the Bitcoin bond, and especially tranche 2.
Yeah.
Maybe it's good to tell the people a little bit about it. And my question would be when is the last term to exercise it for the people and companies that got the option to exercise.
Yes, so the convertible bond, BTC denominated convertible bond that was agreed at the beginning of March had a tranche 2 component that allowed participants to the tranche 1 to double down and a bit more, 1.5x in euros of the initial contributed amount of tranche 1, and that for tranche 2, the investors have the opportunity to subscribe to tranche 2 within 3 months. So that would give a deadline of about 3 to 4 June. So next month. And so that's a few weeks from now. And so that's why Adam has subscribed to tranche 2 that we have announced on Monday. And so some people have been a bit surprised about the conversion price, but in fact, it was already agreed in March, which was at a 60% premium to the 20-day moving average. And so that is an additional Bitcoin accumulation firepower that the company still has over the next few weeks to increase Bitcoin per share over time. And additionally, the French law has some regulation to protect bondholders from new programs to issue equity. And so convertible bondholders that would convert their tranche 1 have the capacity to subscribe as well to new equity in the same conditions as the share subscription rights program that we launched last month. So it's some additional new firepower that we may have as well over the next year. So we do have some new Bitcoin accumulation firepower. It's a potential, it's not a certainty, of course, but it's a capacity of the current tranche 2, tranche 1 convertible debt holders to exercise tranche 2 as Adam has done on Monday. And so, of course, we will communicate on the different operations we have announced on Friday and on Monday are fully completed and provide key KPIs.
So I think, as Alexandre said, the price of this tranche 2 was set at a time when it was a premium, so it was out of the money, and then people had a time to use it, which ends in early June. And so you can see that they took risk by making that commitment, and then they start to exercise it and commit extra capital by doing that once that the share price has overtaken the threshold for conversion. There's a conversion premium, actually 30% above the price. And so, and the price was chosen itself as 30% above the market price. So, by agreeing to that, you're taking a risk that you're agreeing to a price above the market price in a way. So anyway, I think it just reflects that the price went up a lot. But the interesting thing is that, there's some additional tranche 1, and so you can calculate based on like roughly there should be another 70 million euros, assuming that all of the other tranche 1 participants fully use their tranche 2. And I think that's generally a safe assumption because they're now in the money. So if they didn't use it, they would miss out on that benefit, right? So so I guess that, and 70 million is a lot, because I think that could approximately double the Bitcoin in the company. Because as Alexander mentioned, currently I think it's about 58 million I was calculating, and then there's the 22 million extra, so 60, 70, and an additional 70 within 2 weeks or so, assuming these other people make use of it, which I think they have every incentive to do, in fact.
Well, I would like to add, of course, the caveat that none of this is certainty. It's just a capacity of convertible bond holders. And so it may be none of it. It can be part of it. It can be all of it. It can be really any of those three options. So please consider that this is just capacity of the bondholders.
Yep.
All right. Is there any other question? Maybe we can go through last one. I see there is Petro. We'll add you. Yeah. Do you have a question? You're on mute. No.
Hi, good morning.
Yeah.
Actually, good afternoon from me in Texas. I did have a question regarding the way you guys are looking at MNAV relative to NPV or discounted cash flow. Is that something that you're looking at? I mean, I hear these comparisons being thrown around as if to forecast, but MNAV to me sounds predictive, and so that feels like NPV. But yeah, I just would like to hear a little bit of how you guys are thinking about that.
So effectively, when we are talking with fund managers, family offices, and so on, the question about MNAV comes back every time. And I think that they do realize the fact that there is some prediction from the market in terms of what can the Bitcoin Treasury company generate. Some investors understand it as more of a PE ratio. And I think that the new indicator that Adam has shared about the months to cover the MNAV is really the one that is now the most useful for those conversations with traditional investors, for them to understand that it's not only about the premium, it's about the capacity of the company to cover it and exceed it. So it's more
break even. So it's more of a break-even analysis than a forward-looking cash flow or predictive analysis.
So yes, with the nuance that the company, when it generates positive BTC yield, it adds BTC euro gain to the balance sheet. So it's not cash flow on the P&L, but in fact, it's really net asset value gain adjusted for dilution on the company. So yeah, there is some comparisons with the traditional indicators, and depending on the investor, basically the indicator that the investor uses a lot will be the most helpful, I guess. But I think it's also showing that potentially there is a scenario in which at market saturation premiums go to 1, but there is also a scenario in which the premiums could stay constant or go up, because if market participants understand the premium and the MNAV and so on as not only the capacity for the company to cover the premium, but the capacity to generate BTC yield and have more future-looking expectations. I think it's already the case with the Bitcoin community, but that would be expected to be as well extended to the traditional financial institutions. What do you think, Adam?
Yeah, I mean, the MNAV itself is just based on backwards data, but the assumption by talking about months to cover is that your risk is that the MNAV falls to 1, which I think is generally as low as it should fall unless there's excessive debt in the company. And so you are making a forward assumption in that the company's capacity to continue to add Bitcoin for the yields is the same in the future as the past. Then maybe it gets faster, maybe it gets slower. So that part is forward looking. The other part is backwards looking. So I think it's just a way to get comfortable with, is this yield, you know, fair value, or is it cheap, mispriced, or is it overpriced? And if you look at how long it takes to cover it, if it's very short, it's probably quite cheap. In traditional finance, if you were buying, let's say a property management company and it repaid the value of the house, maybe that's going to take 20 years, right? And here we're saying it can cover the asset value in, periods ranging between 4 months and 18 months, which is extremely accelerated. So you can see, and that's really just showing the size and the level of misunderstanding about this sort of macro Bitcoin arbitrage between fiat current picture and a Bitcoinized future, in my opinion. So anyway, I think that it's a useful metric because people are looking at sort of the time period where a capital investment would recoup by income. Even as an individual, if you were to buy an apartment and rent it out, you would be thinking, well, how many years until it will pay for itself? And it's probably going to be 20 years plus, right, at 5% rental returns.
Since you're looking at it like that, can I ask you how you are looking at this in relationship to Misty?
So for people who don't know what Misty is, it's an option strategy ETF on MicroStrategy. So I think Misty is really more of a yield product. So it won't necessarily track MicroStrategy, and in fact, it tends to sink quite fast compared to the stock, because if you look at the basket of what's held in Misty, it's transparent, so you can kind of play along with what the strategy is. It's mostly US Treasuries, earning 4.25 or something % plus then options. So they are trying to generate yield for the ETF investor by having specialists trading that volatility and then paying out monthly dividends. So I think it's a different play. It's a volatility play, and it's for people who want a revenue stream that is really ultimately kind of dollar denominated. That product falls significantly compared to MicroStrategy in the last 12 months, but it paid out dividends above that, right? But if you were if you had a directional view on a treasury company, I think you buy the treasury company. This is more of a dollar yield, making use of the volatility of the treasury company.
I'm only curious because you framed it like a rental company, and a lot of people are framing Misty like a rental company.
I see. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think, with a rental, you would assume the property price is, relatively stable, maybe going up with inflation, right? Whereas because treasury companies are buying Bitcoin, and Bitcoin is on its own trajectory, it's more of a Bitcoin denominated version of that, I guess, in a way, right? So your Bitcoin property is going up at the price of Bitcoin, or the Bitcoin the company owns, and real estate is going up at what the real estate market does, which is generally something related to inflation.
All right. Well, thank you all for participation. I think we can wrap it up. What do you think, Enea? Do you have another question? Maybe I guess we need to do those more frequently. to have more discussions on ALTBG. Yeah, should we wrap it up?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a quick question for you. Are you guys available in Poland?
What do you mean available?
Since you're a Europe-based investment, are you available for Polish investors?
Oh, okay. I've not looked specifically at Polish investors, but I think that if it's available in the US, it should be available for Polish investors. Then if there is any process to follow or inspiration or recommendation, I'd be happy to take it. If there is any platform that is widely used there and we have to make a push, let me know.
Appreciate that. And one last thing, Adam, I know you're coming into the TBC event next week, and if you look up, I'm hosting a Bitcoin meetup in Fort Worth. We would love to have you if you are available.
All right, thanks. Well, look at it.
All right. Well, thank you all thank you for the community of ALTBG. Enea, special thanks to you for coordinating this. Be the Moon for all of the contributions. I see MicroStrategist is there. And the different dashboards and community. There is one on Discord. There is one on X. And thank you very much for all of these contributions. We really look at it and we take into account all of your feedback. So we will keep updating you and we will work a lot on this communication. Please bear with us as we are accelerating this, and we will do all our best to increase the BTC per share over time as fast as possible and communicate more about our metrics. Thank you very much all. Talk soon.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Cheers. And thank you, Adam, for joining us, of course.
Thank
It's
you
an
very much.
honor. Thank you. Bye.